Hi, my name's Hyun Kim, and we'll be looking through the first half of Python introductory course on Kaggle together. And you'll see the latter half with Yuri. This course is set up for real Python beginners that do not know a single thing about Python. We'll be looking at real basic operators of Python in this first chapter, so if you're confident and feel that it's getting too loose, you might as well skip right to the exercise parts and try to solve the questions with the trillion marks on it, which hopefully might be a bit challenging. I noticed that reading through Kaggle alone could be a bit difficult, especially with the exercises, so we'll look through the materials together and see if that helps getting grasp with Python. So when you open up the tutorial, this would probably be the first code you'll be encountering. Let's take a look at it to see how these codes end up with the results on the bottom. By the way, clicking on the output button on the top right side will show you what happens when you run the code. So if you want to see how the codes work, try the button. So the first part is called variable assignment, which is done by using a single equal sign. We create a variable called spam amount and assign it to the value of 0. In other words, from now on, when we say spam amount, it means 0. So here when we say, hey Python, print spam amount, it spits out 0, which is how we assign it. Now, this part may seem a bit tricky, which is reassigning a variable. See how we first assigned spam amount as a 0 on the first line? The second line, we're going to reassign spam amount to what is 4 larger than spam amount. So the spam amount on the right comes from the first line over here, which is 0. So 0 goes over here. So the new spam amount that we're going to reassign is going to be 0 plus 4. So from now on, when we say spam amount, it means 4 because we reassigned it as so. So for whatever code, when we assign a certain value to a certain variable and change the value of that variable in the later parts, it's always going to return the later one and it's going to forget the first one. Oh, and whatever you write with the hashtag will not be read as code, so you can write whatever you want on the lines. It's usually used for taking notes. Next up is if statement, and you could just think of it as English instead of computer language. If something happens, do something. That's exactly what if statement does as a conditional. So if spam amount is larger than 0, print, but I don't want any spam. We assign spam amount as 4, right? So that's why the sentence is printed on the bottom. See how the print statement is indented after the if statement? That's because we want to separate it from other codes underneath. So if there was no such indent, it would go like if the spam amount is larger than 0, print the sentence, and assign Viking song and print Viking song. And this is not what we want here, and that's why indentation is so important in Python. Viking song is another variable assignment that we've covered before. It's just like spam amount equals 0. From the codes over here, we can see that we could multiply words in quotation marks with numbers. Actually, these words within quotation marks are called strings, but it'll be covered later in Yuri's part. And just think of it as human words for now. Human words can be multiplied with numbers, and the result is repeating the human word a certain number of times. Since spam amount was 4, we're going to repeat it 4 times. And so, now that we've seen the basic code, so let's look at the mathematics in Python. First, we have to know about the data types. String that I mentioned earlier is one of the data types, but it doesn't have to do with math for now. Data types related to numbers are int, which stands for integers, and float, which means floating numbers, which has decimal points. If we use a type function, it returns the data type of what's inside the parentheses. So Spam amount, which is 4, returns int because it's an integer. And 19.95 returns float because it has numbers underneath the decimal point. Next up, this chart shows what you can do with Python mathematically, and I'm sure you'll know most of them, but let's look at these floor division and modulus. Okay, so if we do floor division, it returns this part. So if it was 5 and 2, it would return 2 because it's 2 times 2 plus 1. And this percentage sign would return the remainder. Okay, finally, let's look at some built-in functions. Max and min is maximum and minimum. It returns the maximum and minimum value from the numbers within the parentheses. And you can see that when we did min, it returned 1, which is the minimum. And when we say max, it returns the maximum, which is the maximum in here. And next up is abs, which returns the absolute value of its argument. So it removes the negative signs from the number. And I'm sure you all know what it means. And from now on, let's move on to exercises to try these ourselves.